Hey, and welcome to another episode of RivianTrackr Hangouts. My name is Jose, and I am here today with Mike Calcara. And you're probably wondering, who's Mike? Never heard of him. Well, that's okay. Mike is a good friend of mine. We've met at a couple of Rivian events. We also met at the North Carolina IANA opening in Apex, North Carolina. Super nice guy. He's been following RivianTrackr for a while. And he has his own business called the Driveway Concierge. It's a business that helps you find the ride of your dreams, right? So you can drive away, whether it's a Rivian or any type of vehicle. Mike is here to help you with his business, the Driveway Concierge, to be able to get you kind of the vehicle of your dreams. And so Mike is also a Rivian owner, and we've kind of chit-chatted a bit of back and forth on social media about Rivian, his ownership experience, and we also want to touch base a little bit on other things that are happening in the EV industry right now, such as the recent announcement of the Slate EV, which is a new affordable, cheap EV that's coming built here in America. And we can talk about dealerships too, because Mike does have experience dealing with dealerships directly. And so I want to get his take and talk a little bit about what the future of that looks like. So join me as we talk with Mike here from the Driveway Concierge and talk all things Rivian, EV, and more on this week's episode of RivianTrackr Hangouts. Mike, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Jose, it's great to be on. I'm doing really well. How are you?
Good, man. Good to have you here. We've had a couple of times to chat. We met up in North Carolina. Was that last year? I don't even remember if it was last year or earlier this year. I think it was the end of last year for
Yeah.
the opening of the IANA Rechargery in Apex because you are a North Carolina native, so you're out in that area, and so you came out to check it out. What did you think of that? I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Well, I'm a New Jersey native, and that'll probably come out in
Ooh.
my accent at some point in this conversation. But I have been in Charlotte for a good while now. I thought the charging whole experience there was great. I think seeing everybody turn out was awesome. Meeting you for the first time was terrific in person, and I think that type of experience has to be sort of like more broadly broadcast, right? So that folks can see, hey, look, when you're at a charging station, it's not just for charging, right? There's a lot more you can do there and make use of that time.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, and since we went to that, IANA is only continuing to expand and grow, right? They've continued to open more and more of these locations around the country, and even more so, like the opportunity to have these type of like cultural centers, if I could even use that word, around EV charging, right, where people can go hang out, not just charge, but chill, relax,
It's an
have a
experience.
drink.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an experience, exactly. But Mike, let's rewind a little bit. Let's talk about your Rivian experience. I like to always talk about that with everybody I have on it, if they own a Rivian. And talk to me a little bit about how you got introduced to Rivian. You own a Rivian now, so I'm curious to know, what got you into it. What has your experience been like, and yeah, your journey with Rivian so far.
Sure. So I had a pre-order. So I've been kind of following the brand for a number of years now, right? Pre-price hike and have an R1S quad motor, first gen. It's been I'm in the dream job, right? I have this opportunity to do what I love. I've had a bunch of cars, I think somewhere close to 20, and I'd say the Rivian is easily in the top three. Depending on kind of what metrics you're looking at. But in terms of day to day drive and the functionality, it's been terrific. And I think that you know, given the job I have now and what I'm doing with clients, there are some we've all had them, right? Like some of the quirks, if you will. Quirks and features, if you want to call it that.
Yep, yep, yep.
So depending on how you look at them, my experience has been good. We could talk a little bit about kind of my service center experience as well, and how that I think has positively evolved over the past. I guess I've had it it'll be a year in May. So 1 year with the so I got the Gen 1 quad at the end of its sort of life cycle, if you will.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, yeah, let's talk a little because you're out in Charlotte. Charlotte right now doesn't really have a proper service center, right? And so
Mhm.
they're getting one built out. Um, Opening date TBD. But I'm curious to know, like, yes, you've had some service issues from what you've told me, not uncommon with Rivian and EVs in general. But tell me what that's been like, especially living away, because your nearest service center is, if I'm not mistaken, Duncan, South Carolina.
Mhm.
I don't know how many hours is that away from you.
It's about an hour and a half now, but prior to Duncan opening, which was a couple months ago, Atlanta would be the closest. So
Oh wow.
that's a 4 hour hike, right? So that's a different conversation altogether. Um,
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about, yeah, tell me about your service experience. And I mean, clearly now you're closer to a service center, but before that, wow, it is a jump away, you know, it's pretty far. How did you feel with owning a vehicle that, you know, couldn't be serviced, you know, right around the corner, like, you know, how you have a Toyota dealership everywhere and you
sure.
can just, you know, drive in and get a service anywhere you are.
Well, I think at some point we all signed that paperwork that said like, "Hey, your service center, it may not be close to you," and you kind of
Yeah.
sign it, and you're like, "Okay, well, yeah, we'll worry about it when I need to worry about it," right? And so I did need to worry about it last August. I had a critical battery error. It was sort of tied to the 12 volt, but they ended up needing to do quite a bit of work. Um, so they took it, they towed it because the car was inoperable at all. So by the time I got home, it died like a couple days later in the garage, which was sort of an adventure to get it out, but we did. And
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah.
they flatbedded it down to Atlanta. Now I did, and then I did also have a couple of the recalls done simultaneously, which was actually they were great about it. They were like,
Yeah.
"Okay, no problem." I think there was an HVAC one and something else with the suspension, I believe, that
Okay.
could only be done in the service center itself, right? So I sort of took advantage of that opportunity. I said, "Well, it's down there. Let's make sure this is
Let's
time well
do it
spent."
all.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So they actually had the car for about a month, but the now that was not on Rivian. That was the first, like, because I know there's some conversation about the car sitting there for a while. In my experience, it did sit there for a couple days before they got to it to fix it. But then
Yeah.
after that, I sort of interjected and said, "Hey, can we get the recalls done?" And they were open. They beyond open. They were like, "Sure, not a problem." Didn't have to push for anything. That just delayed things a little bit. So then it sat there for another. So just for the context of why it took a month, right? It took another getting queue and everything. Um, and they did want me to come, pick it back up from Atlanta. I was like, "You're crazy," but I do understand that that's what I signed up for. But I did push a little harder, and they were like, "Okay, cool." Well, they brought it back. During that time, I had an enterprise rental car for a couple, maybe 2 weeks or so, and then they got me a Rivian R1T,
Oh, nice.
which was fun, a different kind of experience, and then I'm just thinking about that because that was like a launch edition. So I had some thoughts around the build quality between the two. I was very happy to get mine back. Uh, so
Really? That
yeah, it was
different,
it
huh?
was. I mean, that had about 30,000 miles on it, launch,
Wow.
and and it just and it so. But all that to say, they did get me the Rivian, loaner, and that was a fine experience. And this is can happen with anything. And I think the important thing is that Rivian takes the opportunity to quote unquote do the right thing, right? I mean, whether you have a Ford, a Toyota, a Ferrari, whatever, right? Things are going to happen, right? It's how you kind of navigate that. And the fact that they kind of just said, you know what, I didn't, I had to ask a couple times, like I asked them, hey, can you really consider towing it back because it's 4.5 hours? And they were, within a phone call or two, they came around. So I say that for last August. Now I do have an, I just had my the recall done for the torque. Proper torquing of the wheels. They came to
Yep.
did that. They did an inspection and they found a leak in the suspension boot and they called that out. I just talked to them today actually, and they said it needed to go to service center, and I was like, oh, here we go again. And I said, can you pick it up? And they said yes. So I was like, okay, cool. Now, so I think when you think about the evolution of service for Rivian right now, that's a step in a really positive direction where,
Right.
it wasn't like, hey, bring it to the service center. Hey, can you tow it? Sure. It was, we'll pick it up. Right. And I think that's the type of experience that clients and customers are looking for. Particularly in my role now, where I'm advising folks and trying to help them find the right car for them. For the past year or so, it's been a little bit of that. Rivians are awesome, but we need to talk about service, right? And that's because I need to set expectations with my clients appropriately of what they should expect. I do have I do have another client and friend of mine who had a crazy incident with his. Uh, he's got the GPS and I forget what the communication module needs to get replaced,
Yeah.
which is pretty common.
Okay. Yeah.
Now he's had no GPS,
Oh.
no anything, no Wi-Fi, no internet at all for like 6 or 7 months because he's just too busy to get to the service center to have them do it. So, he's got an appointment in
But
like 2 or 3 weeks.
is that because he couldn't get an appointment that soon, or just his schedule?
Schedule. But
Okay,
he still has to go
okay.
to the service center. It still is, one of those things where it's not as simple as going to a
Although I
local.
do wonder, like something like that, why couldn't a mobile service appointment be dealt with?
Yeah,
Like why
and
wouldn't a
that's where,
mobile
and
appointment do it?
and I think that's a fair question. And it's also a question of, now he's not an early adopter. He's someone who drove my Rivian 3 times around the block and they fell in love with it, right? As a lot of
Yeah,
people do, and they were
that's
like, "This
great.
is the car," right? Um, it shouldn't be on the client though to ask those questions, right? Can mobile service handle it? How can we solve this, right? I think it's got to be
You're right.
something where they are able to kind of say, hey, look, we're going to do this. This is what you can do, or even call them and say, hey, look, now we have this closer service center. Are you aware of it? Kind of proactively handle that. And I get that it's growing pains, right? I mean, and that's the type of stuff that can happen in a more mature organization where it's quite frankly a nice to have for them, right? So they can start chopping off that type of work in terms of their service center SLAs and approach and all that. But yeah, I mean, it's been. I'd rate it as good. I mean, things are going to happen with the car, right? I mean, um, it's not as convenient as going to an OEM, but I don't want to drive those cars. So there you
Yeah,
are. Like,
yeah. Well, and I think this brings up a couple of good questions and topics, because number one is I hear what you're saying about where I've put in service requests with Rivian, for whatever it may be, and like I think that that's something that could be done in mobile service. Now, I am not the expert, right? They are, in theory, they should be able to tell me that I'm wrong, and that this is why I need to bring it into service center. Um, but there have been scenarios where it's like, oh, they don't ever suggest mobile service. I'm like, oh, can't mobile service do that? And they're like, oh yeah, actually, yeah, mobile service can do that, and let me see if that's available. I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, like, why didn't you make that suggestion? Why did I have to bring? I I know these things, but not everybody is going
sure.
to know that.
And that begs the question of, is that why I mean, I don't want to say it's the only reason, but some of the backup that's happening, right? It's like, what can we tackle in mobile, what are we? And then, the space within those service bays
Yeah.
is critical, right? So filling those up with stuff that can be done mobile,
Yeah, and I mean, another thing to that is, Rivian continues to, for some odd reason, release products. I use the example just earlier this week, right? They released the Generation 2 wireless charger, right, that you can
Mhm.
replace in your vehicle, the wireless phone charger. And now, caveat to that is the wireless phone charger, the second generation that now comes into Gen 2 vehicles, is no better than the first one,
Right,
right?
right,
Like, yeah, it has a little piece of plastic that now
yep.
holds your phone a little bit better. Okay. With that caveat out of the way, because I'm not suggesting anybody actually goes and spends the money to do it, um, you need to book a service appointment so they will do it for you. That to me seems like if you just provided people with proper instructions, anybody can do it. Hey, can you remove a couple of screws and make sure that your vehicle's turned off, and unplug this and plug this in, and just be careful? Because I've done that before, right? Like, and and like I'm like, I don't think it requires to take up somebody's whole service appointment, and maybe, maybe it's a mobile service appointment, but that's still an appointment taken out from someone. Let's say like your friend who needs something a
Mhm.
little bit more severe handled, or my vehicle is completely dead in the water and doesn't move, right? Um, all of these appointments, and I'm sure Rivian, weights, they're ranked and weighted differently, right, on
Sure.
severity.
Probably, yeah.
But like either way, if I have an appointment to get my wireless charger replaced, right, because I paid for it, respectfully, I don't care that your Rivian doesn't turn on and doesn't move, right? Like I had
Mhm.
an appointment already at three
Mhm.
o'clock, and like now you have to bring your vehicle for emergency, and I don't know this, right? The customer doesn't
No, of
know this,
course,
but
yeah,
like,
you
yeah,
just want the service that you
yeah.
expect. Yeah.
And so like I'm like, so like these are the things where it's like, well, in that scenario, like, just find a different, there should be a different method where you can allow the end user to do it. And maybe it's a level of trust, or maybe there's a concern that, oh, they're going to electrocute themselves. I don't know, right? Completely possible. I'm not asking them to let me change out the high voltage battery in the car. I'm just saying, I think I can install a wireless charger, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm a little bit more tech savvy, and I'm not saying that's the only solution. There's definitely a solution where if you just don't feel comfortable with it, great, we'll make an appointment for you. But there should be at least the option to say, I want to try, um, or I want to, like, I'm trying, I think you and I are people where we are just trying to be considerate about the situation because we know it, and not
Yeah,
everybody
I
may
think
be
so.
that way, and that's okay. Um, but yeah, okay. So let's talk about service a little bit more about service because yeah, Rivian is slowly ramping up to get ready for R2. Very
Mm.
excited. I don't know if you're excited about R2,
I have
Mike.
my
Do you have one
pre-order. Yep,
reserved?
I do.
Yeah. Um, Everybody's excited about R2, and Rivian really needs to step their game up for service to get ready for R2 because similar to the way Tesla really went through, production hell and all that and service hell when it came to the Model 3, this is Rivian's version of that. And they need to get their I know that sounds a little harsh, but like it's the reality that they need to really get it all together because when R2 goes out to the masses, it's going to the
That's the key.
masses,
That's the
right?
key word. It's
And
all my client. My clients are typically not early adopters. They're not people like you and I who can say, like I'm talking cars all day long. So for me to go call Rivian and hassle with them and haggle with them around getting my car shipped back, it's just I'm just like a client for myself for at the moment. And that's all it is. For my buddy who's dealing with his connection issues and everything and getting that module replaced, like like that's the general public, right? And those are the people that are not going to be tolerant of waiting months for service appointments and loaners and even going. I mean, enterprise is fine. It's a good solution. I think it's a and I mean that in a way like good, better, best. It's a good solution. The best solution is you bring me a Rivian and just swap it out and then call it a
yeah.
day, right? Like, I mean, it works, right? And I understand that, but R2 is just gonna it's a new platform, a new vehicle,
Mhm.
right? New at a lower price point, right? So like all of these things, and I say price point just from, and I'm not gonna assume it's less reliable, but like who knows, right? And it's just at that price point, you're gonna have a whole lot more people who are gonna be expecting a more and frankly, Rivian's been around more, so you're gonna expect a more legacy experience. What I mean by that is just like
Mhm.
the company is sort of does can't play the we're the new guy card anymore. Like they've been around for a while. People are seeing them. There's a bunch of R1s, right? And it's like the R2 comes out. It's like, wait, you mean you guys don't have service centers in Charlotte? Like now, I say that because I have yet to see the Charlotte Service Center, and it's been pushed back a number of times, right? Like a few more times, they're going to bump into R2 real fast, and that's where even right now when I talk about Rivians, you and I have talked about this. I mean, I have the caveat about the service centers, and then if they're in my vehicle, they touch the screen and the buttons don't respond. And I can tell them it's the best car. It's the top 3 cars I've had out of 20. And, there've been a lot of really cool ones touch and it's like, wait, I can't deal with that every day. You and I are like, I like everything else about it. It's fine, like, but Joe Schmo out there is just not going to find that to be acceptable. And I think it's a red flag that, Rivian really needs to take advantage they don't take advantage of it. They just need to fix it because it's one of those things where it's like they need to start integrating, I think, into the sort of standardized expectations of a car experience, right? And I think that there's that early adopter, what's the right word, like uh, leeway you get. Okay, but again,
Yeah.
that's gone now. And if you're offering a $50,000 two-row SUV to 3x the number of people that are buying the R1, right? I mean, if not more, right? I mean, like those things are going to quickly go by the wayside. And I think the tolerant, which I think is the other risk here, is that the tolerance for that across that segment of buyers is going to be way lower than ours is,
Yeah.
right? You and I can
Yeah.
sit there and I can get on X and be like, the button doesn't work, right? And that's fine, right? And but like people out there, who are going to talk to their friends, they're like, this thing's a piece of crap. It's not working.
Yeah.
Why doesn't software work? Like,
Mhm.
and that's where I think, it's important that they're the little stuff. Like I think it's great that we have, and you and I have talked about this too. It's great that we have the monthly updates and there's cool stuff happening. But guys, my buttons haven't worked for 9 months. It's just
Mhm.
a big update, right? Like, I mean, like, so, and for those not the lower screen buttons, right? I mean, those ones,
Yeah.
big
The dock in the
purchases,
dock
the
there. Yeah.
dock, yeah, they take a while, right? I know, and sometimes it takes one load, but still, it's like, I mean, people, they get in the car, the first thing they want to see mine, they click on the bottom, and
Well,
it's an atypical experience. I think it's a good way to think about it, and
it
that's
is.
what
Yeah. And I did a video about it a couple weeks ago at this point, and made some people upset in Rivian, right? Because I kind of spoke the truth about how I think a lot of people have felt, but like, and I think it's fair, like, with running Rivian Tracker and all that, and talking about Rivian and all that, you have to talk about the negative and the positive. I don't want to ever, sugarcoat everything. There are situations, where the software needs help, right? Like it needs
Mhm.
assistance
Like all
and
software platforms do, they evolve and
right.
you add more things on it. It
Yeah,
needs more tweaking. That's normal.
correct. And when it starts really becoming a problem is like someone with like my wife who is not a tech person really in a big way, and she loves the car and she has Ionic 5 and she loves it too. But when she clicks on the HVAC button to change the temperature of the fan speed, and there's a delay in there enough where she's like, and she'll click it again, and I'm like, no, you got to give it a second. She's like, why? Why is that taking so long? Now you have Joe Schmo who's noticed, and it's like,
Mhm.
that's not good. That needs to be resolved. And I know Rivian is working on it, but to your point, why did it take? Why? And as of recording of this, we still don't. It's still a little wonky, but like, why is it taking so long to fix those things? I love all the new features and all that, but yes, we need to still bug fix and maintain and do all that stuff because um, that is what sets, I think, a lot of other. That's what sets Rivian different from others.
Mhm.
It's like Tesla. You look at Tesla. Tesla software is really great.
Mhm.
It has issues here and there as well, but it's really great. And um, I forget what Tesla's like release cycle looks like. I don't know if it's monthly or not, but they also probably have a bigger team.
Yeah. It's
Frankly,
I don't
let's
know if
be
it's
real.
monthly, but it's frequent. It's more frequent than
Yeah,
like
it's frequent.
Ford's. I've had 2
Yeah.
Teslas and a Ford Lightning, so like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's much more frequent. And they're
So,
also a
yes.
more mature platform, right? So like the
Yeah.
level of, improvement you're going to see, it does lend them to more the bug fix stage, right?
Yeah.
Where they're now can kind of expedite some of that. But I think, I wouldn't hate it if Rivian like simplified things. I think about like, this is just Mike's opinion, like the screen with the like the campfire stuff and all the using all the
Yeah.
Unreal Engine and everything. I'm like,
Yeah.
why guys? What are we doing here? I still get my buttons still don't work. I don't need the fire flickering and changing all, like, it's cute, but it's like, let's get to functionality. Now, I do understand that it's a balance, right? And the Knight Rider stuff is cool and all that, and it's part of the marketing and all that, right? And you and I have both been in the software side developing things in other spaces, right? And that it's a balance, right? And there's
Mhm.
release schedules, and you got to kind of get it all kind of squared away. And you fix one thing, you break another, and that's just kind of the space they're in. But I don't know. Especially when we keep calling them Joe Schmo, right? Like when they get there, like they care a lot less about the fire going off and more about those buttons working. And I
Yeah.
think that because I think it starts to spiral a little bit, if that makes sense, where like the buttons don't work. You have a wonky experience, and then it's like, oh, like my buddy whose module broke, he plugged it into an EV Go charger, and it was EV Go. I got to be careful because it did not come out, and it was a mess. So they
Oh,
had
really?
now. I did see. I think somebody posted. I don't know if it was Chris. Somebody posted a way to release the internal mechanism to take out an external third party charger from your.
Okay.
But like they had to cut the wire.
Oh, wow.
Like, I mean, it was that bad, and then, like, it was then once it was cut, he and his buddy just went back to the car and just ripped it out, like, really ripped it out after, like, service was there and
This is
everybody
the
was.
same person?
Yeah, same guy who had
Oh,
the
wow.
module problem, yeah, and I don't know whether they're connected or not, but, like, you know, um, he's just had it but, you ask him, though, which is funny and a great story for Rivian, he's still like, "It's the best car I've ever had."
Yeah, yeah.
He's got no Wi-Fi, no maps, no streaming audio, no GPS, no phone. Still the best car he's ever had in a charger, like, so, but, those are the types of things that start to, I think, need to get cleaned up before R2 comes out, and I
Yeah.
think everybody knows it, and it's just a matter of um how they go about it and just make sure they prioritize it because I think that that's where, I'd rather see less delivered in R2 and it's delivered right. Um, because I think
Yeah.
the price point and the package, if you will, right? Like it doesn't have to blow anybody's socks off in terms of software and everything. Just make it work and then add to it, right? That's the biggest thing, right? Like HVAC stuff, the calibration you just talked about today feels to me like that should be way simpler. A couple
Yeah.
presets, a couple, they have 2 presets, but like make them more. Joe Schmo just needs like at your face, away from your face. I mean, like just like none of this like spiraling stuff. I mean, nobody likes it. And that's where it's kind of like, and simplifying that keeps the touching down, right? Where it's just like, this is just how it's going to work, So I don't know,
Hmm.
some thoughts there, but
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I mean, to back to the just original point quickly, like, and software stuff can be fixed, right? But service centers, physical locations, they need to open more. There needs to be more mobile service availability. They need to, be able to do more mobile service availability, or more things via mobile service, right? So kind of
capability,
figure
improve
out,
the
yeah,
mobile
capable,
capability. Yeah.
exactly,
Mhm.
yeah, and so those are key points because as soon as the floodgates open with R2, it's like you're not going to get the leeway or the early adopter. You've opened up the floodgates and everybody's now going to come at you, and
And the
so
social media
eh,
side, right? It's not going to be the Rivian
yeah,
circle that it is now, who is like,
no,
let's talk about it. And we're all kind of early adopters. It's going to be the influencers, quote unquote, of other
yeah,
spaces,
yeah.
right? Who bought it and they're like, oh my God, my Rivian left me stranded on the side of the road. And it's like, uh-oh.
Yeah, the mom TikToker who has a huge following because of, she's a baker, is gonna buy that R2, and it's gonna be a nightmare. And that's not the publicity and press that Rivian is gonna want to have, at all. So they need to get that figured out, and sooner rather than later. And I know they're working on it, but I feel like Rivian just needs to be a little bit more transparent and have clarity, and just share that information so people understand that it's coming and it's happening, so that we're not. And then also, like, maybe, people, the biggest comment I saw people say is like, well, Jose, maybe Rivian just needs a better QA team internally, right? So the vehicles leave without issues. And I can agree a little bit to that, but issues will always arise after the fact. And especially on a software defined vehicle, sometimes the software is a culprit
Are you
that does
saying at
something.
launch, at the build, after post build, or
Yeah, at
post
the
like a,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I think that just seems to be an easy one for them to
Yeah.
kind of like
But
get their,
that's not gonna fix
mhm.
all of them, right?
No, I mean, the stuff I had mine fixed was QA stuff, but it's the same things I went through with my Tesla, where it was like,
Exactly.
okay, like this is like they did a lot of stuff at mine, but it was like it was aesthetic, mostly aesthetic.
Sure.
Um, but I was going to say too, I think, and you and I have spoken about the fact that there needs to be more transparency around their improvements, but also like I want to give them credit, right? And that's what like my experience has been much better, right? It is getting better, right? And I think that that's
Yeah.
important. But
100%. 100%.
it's they should. Well, it almost begs the question. Hopefully, they know why it's getting better, right? Like, I mean, they're doing things, and what I mean by that is like if we're not hearing about it, you can also ask the question like, are they aware it's getting better? Are they have the right metrics? Are they not? Why are they not bragging about? I always would tell teams in the past like that. It worked for me. It's like brag about what you're succeed. Like tell me, like you got it, and
Yeah.
that's not coming out, right? But like somewhere in the process, they no longer are pushing back on clients needing to get their car, um, to the service center. Now, I don't know whether my truck's going to the local one in Charlotte, which is very, very, very small. They've told me that, like, or whether it's going to Greenville or it's going down to Atlanta. I don't know, right? But
Yeah.
like, however it's happening, it's a smoother experience for me, and I think that's great.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, we can talk all day about that stuff, but let's talk about something. I texted you and said, Mike, I want to talk about dealerships. And I was and you were like, oh boy. And I say that because, I had a recent dealership experience last year when I got my wife's Ionic 5.
I'm
But
so sorry to
really,
hear
what uh,
that.
what the car is great.
Oh, I know
Um,
that. I meant the dealership experience. I know
oh
the car
yeah,
is great.
well,
When we got that, that was awesome.
I will say this: the dealership located here in Florida was actually really nice.
Mhm.
And truthfully, I was able to do everything online. It was just like the whole, still, you, it's just still like an experience of going to a dealership.
Sure. Yep.
And I was a little bit spoiled because I've had Tesla and I've had Rivian, so like I don't go to dealerships, and that's just maybe spoiled Jose talking. But that less of that and more about recently. So a couple of weekends ago, my wife and I were out, and I went to film some content for our friend Kyle from Out of Spec.
Mm.
And somebody's going to complain about the fact that I talked about Kyle and Out of Spec, because every video I talk about him, they're like, "Why do you always bring up Kyle? Great guy, love him. He's a friend of mine."
Mhm.
But I went and recorded some content on the VinFast VF9, which is now out, and whatever. So, and then after that, that was a pretty decent experience, right? I was like the only person at the dealership because I don't think people know
You were
what a
at the
VinFast
VinFast
is.
dealership, is that right? Or
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
got it,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So we have one here in Orlando. So I went
Mhm.
to it, told the guy I want to record, super easy, right? No issues. Um, but on my way out, my wife and we drove by a VW dealership, and we saw a bunch of ID buzzes out, and
Mhm.
yeah, and I told my wife, like, I want to go check it out. Let's stop and check it out, because I actually haven't like driven one
Mhm.
or like really seen one up in person. Like, I haven't had the chance. So we did. And it did not take more than a microsecond of me stepping out of the car for this guy to come out and like come and attack me, and like, why are you here? Are you trading in the Rivian? I'm like, no, I'm not trading in the Rivian. Let's calm down. I'm here because I just want to see the ID buzz. Like, I see them around. There's nostalgia factor. I'm curious about it.
Mhm.
So he kind of walks us over to the cars. He's like, "These are the ones we have," and then he's like, he asked me the question of like, "Do I know that this is electric?" And like, "Have I ever driven an electric car?" And I go, "I'm driving a Rivian." He's like, "Oh yeah, that's electric." I'm like, "Yes." So, and then he starts talking to me, but he starts talking utter nonsense about EVs, like about
Mhm.
how they just doesn't have really good range. And I understand that the buzz is not perfect, but like, oh, you got to charge it every night because you're not going to be able to get around town. And and like, he's
No,
clearly
no,
trying to not sell me on the vehicle, which is like
and you wonder
just
why there's an adoption problem with EVs
right.
in
I
country. Yeah.
and I'm sitting there. My wife goes. She's like, after the fact, she's like, "Did are they just not trying to sell electric cars?" I'm like, "Yeah, literally, that is exactly what's happening here." Like, this guy who, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful or mean, but you could tell he was an older gentleman, not very much EV aware. And I say, "Okay, can you like, I want." He's like, "We're looking at them outside," and I'm like, Can you grab me a set of keys? Like, I'd love to look inside, take a drive." He's like, "Well, I can't take you for a drive unless like you sign a paperwork that says you're gonna buy it." I'm like, "That doesn't. I'm not gonna do that. Like, I'm not here to buy. I'm literally shopping, right? Like, I'm not at the point
Mhm.
where I'm ready to buy it." Well, it's like, "If you want to drive something, I can drive you an ID4." I'm like, "Well, no, I've driven ID4s before. That's not the same. Like that, which is electric." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's not the same. Like, that's just like no." It's
Yeah.
like the no. Please stop." So I tell the guy, I'm like, Can you get me key? Can I at least look inside?" So he begrudgingly goes inside and gets a set of keys, and doesn't
Mhm.
even get the set of keys for the one I wanted to see, which had like the sunroof and everything. So he
Yeah.
gets me one that's just like a plain black one. I'm like,
Mhm.
"Well, this is boring." And whatever. So I sat inside of it. I'm like, "Wow, this is massive." And like, the ID Buzz in general, like, it's a huge van. And I'm like, "What is this monster?" I'm like, I'm 6'3" and I'm standing next to that thing, and it's taller than me. And I'm like, "This is massive." Whatever. Okay. Well, wanted to drive it, couldn't drive it. So we leave. He's like, "Oh, come on in. We'll sit down and talk numbers." I'm like, "Well, I'm not buying." And honestly, you wouldn't even, and I tell him, I'm like, "You wouldn't even let me test drive it. So I'm definitely not going to sit down and do numbers with you. If I was interested, I would just go to the other VW dealership across town,
Mhm.
where maybe I'll have somebody with a better experience." And he got really upset and defensive. And I'm like, "I'm not trying to offend you, but like, you've come to me." And my wife's like, "Oh my God, stop it. You're making a show." I'm like, "I'm not making a show." I'm like, "I'm just saying, like,
Mhm.
I came in here to check out this car. And if I was somebody who didn't really know anything about this, like, I learned absolutely nothing other than you told me it's not really good and it has
Right,
very low
right, right. And
range,
you wanna
right?"
buy it though.
Right. And he's like, "Oh, and it costs $80,000." I'm like, "Jesus, no wonder these things aren't selling." So because they had like 12 or 13 on the lot, like a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
And so what I ended up there leaving with was a distaste, like just a distaste in my mouth, because all I wanted was an experience where I could walk
Hmm.
in, take a look at the vehicle, check it out, maybe ask some questions, learn about it, test drive it, and then decide if that was something I'm interested in. And I can't do that. Like, I can do that with Rivian, I can do that with Tesla, um, but I can do that with Lucid, but I just
You can do
cannot
that with
with.
the Driveway Concierge.
You can do that. We'll talk about that in a bit. But like, but like, why? Tell me, Mike. Like, why is this so difficult? And why are different dealerships just so
So,
freaking
and I think
difficult?
there's a couple pieces here to think about. First, just remind all the viewers, right, that dealerships are franchises, right? So they're
Yeah,
franchisee owners, right? They're owners, individual franchises. So they're not a direct to consumer model where if you go to a Tesla dealership, every Tesla kind of has the same blueprint, so to speak, right?
right.
So I think that's the first step. So not all dealerships are created equally, right? And I think that's important, right? So you walk into one VW dealer, it's going to be different than another, assuming they're owned by different companies, right? And I'll start with like a little bit of a story that kind of got me started on my company. It was at the New York Auto Show a couple of years ago. I was actually at a Ford Lightning, and I had a Lightning at the time, and I was speaking to two people there who were just browsing, right, and looking at the car, and I was telling them my experiences, and they were just absolutely enamored with it. Then there was a Ford rep who was also there and helping answer questions, and I clearly knew more than they did, but they were nice enough, right? And like
Yeah,
because this was early on in the I got the Ford Pro, I got the when it just came out, right? So like the Lightning is the hot thing, right? And I looked around and I said, this is again before the Driveway Concierge even existed. I was saying, people genuinely like cars. I think that it's one of those things that like folks want to do what you just did, right? Was sit in it, feel it, drive it, and not have the pressure. Because I looked around and I saw 50% men, 50% women. You kind of get this idea that just men want to buy cars. Like, no, women really like cars as well, right? And they want to have a good experience. You can do that at an auto show. There's no pressure to buy
yeah.
anything, right? And that was where like the idea kind of popped in my head where I was like, how can I make this experience better for folks so that when that time comes to go look at a vehicle, you don't have the experience you just had, right? Because in that sense, when you're walking onto the dealership, and this is where, I'm a little bit torn too. It's like, these are folks who are professional salespeople, right? It's their job to sell you a car. Unfortunately, that doesn't reconcile with just browsing, right? Now, there's a funny
Hmm.
post by a couple folks on X who said, he's a good friend of mine, but he's posted, you'd be shocked how many times just browsing turns into a purchase vehicle. And by shocked, I mean way higher than you think, right? They're salespeople. That's their job. They need to put food on the
Yeah,
table. And I say all
yeah,
that because like it's just the kind of the nature of the beast. When you set your foot on this on the dealership grounds, that's going to happen. Unfortunately, that makes for a really terrible experience. I agree with you. Even when I go like shop for something, if I'm not using a contact that I know, it's like, oh my God. And then it's like the stuff they try to tell me, it's like, well, come on, man. Like this isn't even close to true. And that's where, I think it kind of detracts a bit from the experience. Now, the dealership, it's all very, it's not perfect, right? And I think that the folks there, the successful ones, right? I've worked with all across the range, right? Folks who are very pushy in the sense of like what you just experienced, and then there's also
yeah.
folks who are like, hey, look, come back when you're ready, And I think that the latter is more in line with the experience that I want to create for my clients. But I think that those types of salespeople, I don't want to say they're more or less successful, but I'd imagine in the long term, those that have the less pressure are kind of where the market's moving because people are
Yeah.
getting more exposure to the DTC model, right? With Tesla and Rivian and Lucid, right? Where like you can go to Lucid's in like a mall, right? And you walk in there and there's, that's a different experience. And they're just like, cool, you want to buy it? Cool. You don't want to buy it? Cool. Like, I mean, whatever works, right? And that's where I think people are more gravitating toward. And that's, and that's where the dealerships, back to my point around them being franchises, those that embrace a less, there's a big talk around no haggle dealerships now, kind of adopting the Carvana model where like the price you see is the price you see, right? And it's like,
And I think that's the way I see it, right? Is like when I go into an Apple store, I'm not negotiating the price of a laptop, right? Like I
Mhm.
know what I'm going to pay for that MacBook Pro, and that's kind of what I like about Rivian. And some people may not like it. Some people probably do like the haggling and the hassling, right? That comes along with owning a vehicle, like going to a dealership.
I hear it a lot,
But
yeah.
yeah, but I enjoy the direct. Like this is it's like everything else in life. Like you go to a supermarket, you're not like, "Oh, I'll give you $4 for that bread," right? Like no, you're paying,
Mhm.
whatever price is
The
on
market
there.
price, right, and that's
Yeah,
the problem, the market price, right, for the bread. My qualm with it is that, you can go to 2 different whatever dealership to we'll just keep using VW, and from here on out, it's not knock on VW, it's just it is you can go 2 VW dealerships 5 miles apart from each other and
sure,
pay
sure.
$5,000 different or get offered the same vehicle $5,000 apart from each other. That's not
Yeah,
uncommon, right? And I think that
right.
that's where, because there is a claim that, the no haggle dealerships that you can get a lower price if there is negotiation available for the consumer. And I buy that, but I don't necessarily know. And when you look at it in aggregate, right? I mean, are people getting more better prices or more ripped off in aggregate when you look at all the deals and sales that happen, right? So that's where the big
Yeah,
argument comes, where it's like, oh well, we let you negotiate with us, right? And they're not giving these cars away, right? And that's where they will certainly rob you blind. Like it's not like, oh, you got us and we'll give you $5,000 off, but they'll charge you
right.
$5,000 over anytime they want, right?
Yeah,
Again, when you step foot on the dealership lot, and I keep saying this not in defense of that, but it's more just awareness, right? It's like you have to be careful because you can get sold, and it happens all the time, right? And it's like, and though they give you, it gets very overwhelming quickly. You get confused between trims. You have a trade in. You have this. You all these things to consider, and you spend 3 hours there. You're like, well, I'm pot committed at this point. 3 hours here, I'm going to buy that VW Buzz for $80,000. I guarantee you, somebody, well, maybe not the Buzz right now, but somebody has done what came in with your experience and then walked out with a car. And that's and if you're the only one on the lot, that guy's going to swing and swing and swing and swing and swing and just keep trying, right? And then so that's where it's
yeah.
just unfortunately just not compatible with a good customer
Experience.
experience.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and so with all that being said, do you think the dealership model is sustainable? Like, do you think we're going to continue to see this exist, or do you foresee a future where we just go direct to consumer for everything like this?
I think
Knowing that your job relies on this dealership
so.
model.
Interesting. That's an interesting point though. But my job doesn't, and that's why I'm different because
Okay,
there
so
are other broker style services, and I've had
sure,
clients who and I've asked them and seen clients call and they'd be like, I don't work with Tesla or I don't work with Rivian. And
right,
I think shame on them because my job, and we've talked about this, is anybody can get you a good deal on a car. Not everybody can find you the right, anybody can get you a good deal. Not everybody can find you the right car. And that's
right,
really what I'm building my brand on, right? Whereas I want to spend time with my clients to really understand, hey, is a Rivian the right fit for you? Is a Tesla the right fit for you? I work for my clients directly, not for the dealership. So, or Rivian or Tesla or anything like that, right? So it just doesn't. I want to find the right car for you. So I think the DTC model has some inherent advantages, right, in terms of transparency, right? Which okay, so that takes away a little bit of the service that I'm providing my clients in terms of transparent pricing and negotiating and all that.
yeah,
But again, that's not. If I'm not building a business on transparent pricing, I'm building a business on finding the right car for my clients. So the DTC model is great from that perspective. It has flaws in the service model, right? The fact that I have a client out in Idaho right now, and there's not, and there happens to be a Ford dealership in like Sun Valley, Idaho right now, and there's nothing for like 3 hours outside of that. So they're getting a Ford, but like awesome, right? I mean, Ford is able to be there to service, and they're like, we can't buy another car because we don't want to have a problem and have to go somewhere else, right? Like, so
yeah,
there's some inherent advantages to having that footprint. Now, I think that what I would encourage the OEMs to look at is standardizing the experience. And what I've got some background in this space, kind of a prior life, and like when you walk onto 3 different Ford dealerships, for example, locally here, I've had they're not standardized. There's not a standard operating procedure
no,
or
there is
how
not.
to engage clients, right? That's up to the dealerships. And I think that that's where the flaw in the model comes in. But I think that because of lobbyists and all these other things, like I don't think you're going to see. Well, I mean, I say it's going to be an uphill battle for a DTC style model to come to the States. Now, Ford is trying to do it. I believe you can order your Mustang Mach-E online in some cases. And Lightning is kind of moving in that direction. Now, I don't know whether that's going to be an EV only type approach,
Yeah.
which is also back to the standardization of like standardization of experience on dealership grounds. Because like when you go to Ford, I walked in and spoke to a salesperson, and this is just anecdotal. I said, "Sell me on this Lightning," and he didn't know I had one. And he starts talking about the 12-inch infotainment screen. I go, and now I've had 3 F-150s prior to that, yes, and a Lightning. I was like, and you're going to talk to me about the infotainment screen. You're not going to talk to me about the power front that solves the biggest problem in full-size pickup trucks is having
Yeah.
lockable storage, right? You're not going to talk about 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. You're not going to talk about the fact that it no longer gets under 20 miles to the gallon. You're not going to talk about like all the convenience of electric. You're going to talk about the infotainment, and then you wonder why no one's buying EVs. You go to the VWs, and it's like, and that's what gets me really upset. But like, that's a different conversation from where dealerships are. But like, the DTC model, I think, is something that could be adopted, but it can only happen if both sides come together, right? And the
Sure.
franchises that own the dealerships, there's not incentive, right? There's a disincentive, and I can't speak precisely to the compensation structures or anything like that, right?
Sure.
But like, if Ford is selling direct to the consumer, and this is what you got, I think you could, I don't know if you're on the computer, like go to the Mach-E, order a Mach-E online, comes there, it's the deal is consummated by the dealership, right? They may not get paid as much, there may not be as much margins on there as they can sell an ICE F-150, right? So
Yeah.
you get a Mustang Mach-E or a Lightning or whatever, and they're just, and that's what they do in Europe, I believe, where they just close the paperwork. It's an agency model, it's called. So the dealership here, like, why would they want to sell EVs? And if they're not going to make as much money on them,
Right.
versus an ICE truck where that's going to sustain their model, right? They don't, again, back to like, they want to make money. It's a business, right? Like, they're not necessarily concerned about getting you in the right car, right? So it's like, I mean,
No, that's
right,
never been
that's
their
never
that's
been
never
their
been
thing,
their thing.
right? They want to
No.
sell you what they have on the lot, not what they
Right.
have, what
I
the right
can't tell you
answer
the
is.
amount of like it's such a sorry to interrupt, but like it's such a weird thing that like old Jose from many years ago would go into a dealership with the mindset of something and then would leave with something else, right? Because
Mhm.
it's whatever they had, and they would
I mean,
finagle their
yeah,
way to getting you to what you want
I had
to
a
like the
client the
thing
other
they
day who just got she thought she had a car. She gave me the specs. I called my dealership, and they had the same one she was at without me, and they had one that matched, and it was a service loaner. So she was leasing, and I was like, cool, that's a fine thing to do, lease a service loaner.
yeah.
And she's like, how did they not tell me about this when I was there? I said to her, I was like, well, I mean, I said it nicely. I was like, well, I mean, you weren't with me. So I told you not to go there, right? Like, because they're only going to sell you what was on the lot that day. They weren't going to go and say, hey, look, I can pull this car out of service when it gets done in a week and a half, right? Because it matches your specs exactly. Now, when I called my
Right.
guy, he was like, oh, yeah, we'll just pull it out of service because he knows when you have the relationship, right? But when you walk into that storefront, she could have bought that another car they were trying to sell her, but it wasn't the
Yeah.
right match because they're trying to make a sale. And that, I don't think anybody's wrong. It's just that's just the environment that we're operating in, right? And
Yeah.
it's like it's not malicious. They need to, and it's just, but we all need to kind of like lower the temperature, but also recognize and go in there in an informed manner. Where it's like this is how. Now it's unfortunate because something like the buzz needs more buzz. It needs people seeing it and getting in it and
Yeah.
understanding like the size of it. And that's, but like that guy's like, oh, I'm not going to make a sale. I'm not interested. Or they're not making as much money on them, so I'm not, the dealership's not incentivized to move them. So.
Yeah, so that kind of I want to segue a little bit there, uh, and that is, we had somebody on X ask this question, and I mean this is a valid question. There are people who end up, trading in their Rivians into dealerships, right, to get something else. It happens, right? It doesn't end up working out for them, and so now this dealership is left with this R1T or R1S. Sometimes they flip it around and sell at auction, right? Whatever it may be. But sometimes they just put it on their lot and try to sell it. What how do we feel about that? Like, how do you go into a dealership that already, and this is I'm making a generalization, but understand that this is not the case across the board. But if you're going to a dealership that already doesn't really understand EVs or
Mhm.
doesn't grasp their own EVs, right, let alone a competitor, how can somebody go in and be like, yeah, I'm interested in that Rivian out there, and they're like, okay, what? Well, how do you even like approach that, and like how does that get resolved?
I mean, you're on your own with, like, I mean,
Yeah,
that's what
right.
I mean. It's just not something where, I mean, I routinely find salespeople, and some people may get upset by me saying this, who don't know their own collection of cars that they sell.
Yeah, yeah,
It's they may have five. I would argue that most brands have between 3 and 5 cars that actually matter, right? I mean, you can go
yeah.
walk on a Mercedes lot and there's like 50, right? Like, and it's good. These brands are
So
getting way
many.
too many cars, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, fine. If you don't know every spec of every, but like, I mean, I don't decline a car before, like I do every brand and I figure it out, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, like, and so it's kind of, and so then a Rivian is just an absolute, wild card. They're never going to understand it, and I think it does a little bit of a disservice to buy one there. I think, if you don't have a coach, right, or someone who can help
Right.
you like understand it or introduce you to the brand, because there's so many more nuances. Like we talked about, like why I was excited about getting my R1S back. That was a late production Gen One. I don't know the nuances, but drove 2 cars. Now, I mean, like, it can happen with any brand, right? I mean, like, over time, I know Tesla's very transparent about the fact that they make changes in the midst of production line, right? Like, they
Yeah.
stop and change things
Yeah.
along the way. Model years, I don't believe Rivian has many model years, if any, right? We don't There's not really like a
They
designation.
well, yeah, yes and no. So like 2022 to 2023 was the Gen 1, and then Gen 2 has started in 2025.
Mhm.
And we expect we'll see a 2026 model year Rivian here soon, and most likely that one will include the NACS
Sure, like,
ports,
but
right?
mine
So
I
like
bought mine in '24. It was produced in, I don't know, February or March or something like that. I mean, but it doesn't say '24. But like, the production quality
dozens.
of
Yeah.
my car feels a lot better than some of the I've driven a couple. I was in Atlanta and drove a few of their demos. They were definitely rattling more and everything.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
like, in those, and then the loaner I had, like, now I don't know what my car is going to be like at 30,000 miles.
No,
But
yeah.
you know, um, but yeah,
Although
I mean,
we can agree the loaners get beat up
they do. Oh,
regardless.
they do get beat up. So it's not
So
necessarily a fair. Um,
right.
but I did drive, when I did drive my demo drive in Atlanta, that those cars only had like 2 or 3,000 miles on them, and they were loud.
Yeah.
I heard a
Wow.
lot, and I know they made suspension changes and all that. So it's just, but those are all questions, right? I mean, now the other day I drove 3 or 4 forerunners that were within 5 years old, and they all drove wildly differently from one another, and
That's
they all had
crazy.
under 30,000 miles, and they were Toyotas. So
Yeah, I
like,
mean,
anybody, and
it's
this is work. Yeah,
every car.
every
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 car.
every company is guilty of it now. Um, and those are Toyotas, right? I mean, those are forerunners. Those are the same. They've fundamentally been the same truck for the last 15 years, right? Like, and
Yeah.
there's still variation between them, and that's where, buying pre-owned is just a tricky proposition. Now, I also know that, and keep me honest, is it 5 years the warranty on the Gen One quad motors? Right,
Mhm.
it's like 5 years, which is something that folks who are looking for pre-owned Rivians, right? That quad motor is a pretty good deal. You get a nice long warranty on it,
Yeah.
and that's for the
And
body.
on
That's for the bumper to bumper, right? Or is that just beyond the battery? I forget.
yeah, they have a manufacturer's warranty
Yeah.
still included in there, and I'd have to look it up. I'll post the links, but I think the general consensus is if you're looking at a pre-owned Rivian, your best bet is just to go on Rivian's pre-owned website, right? Like go directly through Rivian. No
Mhm.
different than buying a pre-certified or a certified pre-owned vehicle from Honda or whatever. I think that you're better. Like while Rivian doesn't call their vehicles certified pre-owned, they are still they have their warranty. They're inspected. They go through all the stuff, and maybe it'll cost you a little bit more, maybe it won't, but, like, I feel like if you're looking for a pre-owned Rivian, that might be the best way to go about it. Um, or,
And
you
you're gonna
know
pick it up there, right? I mean, like, you're gonna
yeah,
pick it up at a
those
service
yeah,
center. I think there's some
yeah,
advantages there where
exactly.
it's like, "Hey, look, is this normal?" And I'm sure Rivian would be like, "It's not normal. Hold on." Like,
Right.
before we want, like, versus you go to Ford dealer, like, Good if I know. I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, it's just one of those things where like you'll be like, I've never sat in this thing before. I don't know. Because
Wow.
there's a lot of things like wind buffeting and all that were early on, right? Those are things that
Yeah.
that you got to think about. That's something where folks are looking at early gen productions. You're going to hear a lot more wind buffeting around the side view mirrors and up top around and that stuff gets,
100%. Yeah.
there's a lot of variation there. And those are things
Well,
that, you got to think about.
I think that's a good point there to kind of transition and kind of wrap up on talking about what you do in your business, right? I think we've I've let you hold out long enough. So let's talk a little bit about your business that you call the Driveway Concierge, and tell people a little bit about what your business does, right? Like, what do you help people? Because all of this stuff that we kind of talked about is stuff that you can help people with who are interested in
Mhm.
buying a vehicle.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Driveway Concierge was really founded, with the idea that I wanted to help people find the right car at the right price. It's really simple, right? And, I found it because I had tons of friends and family coming to me saying, "Oh, I just bought this car. Was it a good deal? Did you sign the paperwork already?" And they're like, "Yeah, I did." And it's like, "Oh, it's a great deal now." Like it's too late. And that's what I want to get in front of, right? And so when you work with me, we really sit down and make this a personalized, like done for you type service, right? We're going to sit there, we're going to talk through a nice long matchmaking questionnaire and by long, it's like 20 questions, takes you 5 minutes. So don't get too worried. But it really kind of helps us hone in on what exactly you're looking for, how you're using your vehicle. From there, then we play that matchmaking game where we'll get online together. We'll have a virtual call like this, where I'll talk you through maybe 6 or 8 options. One of the really common asks for me is someone coming to me saying, "Look, I got a budget of around $60,000, a 3-row SUV. I have 2 kids, a
Yeah.
dog, and no time, right? Like, what do I need to be looking at, right?" That's like 99% of America, right? They're just sitting there
Yeah,
like, I need
yeah.
a new, like when you're shopping for a new car, those are the types of things. But that market is wildly populated, right? There's a ton of cars in there. We work through that matchmaking together. We kind of narrow that list down from 6 or 8 cars down to like 2 or 4 that kind of really fit your needs pretty well, right? And that's our short list. From there, if you happen to live in Charlotte with me, I'll come with you on the test drives and really kind of like make sure that everything is on the ship is being steered properly. If you are out of state, I can certainly help there too. I call ahead, make sure all your appointments are set up, speak to the dealers ahead of time. The salespeople know you're not buying a car that day. And then from
Yeah.
there, like they know you're going to, I do everything from Ford to Ferrari. So you can go to BMW, Mercedes, Audi. That's a pretty common track, right? You're kind of checking out those cars in that competitive segment, right? From there, you and I just circle up and we talk, figure out what the right car is. And then I handle all the negotiating. We'll usually get it delivered to your house. And it's pretty easy. I mean, Cox Automotive had a study that said, on average, people are spending 20 hours shopping for their new car. A lot of clients come to me and they're like, by the time they get to me, they're like 20 hours. Like I've blown through that, which is really kind of scary to think about. But like when
Yeah.
you really add up all the YouTube, watching those videos, you know, out of spec, right? It's going to take you 3 hours to get through. No shame on Kyle, but we know,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
But you have to but he has that because there's so much information to digest, right? And you really
100%.
need to, and you're still not going to go through all of that, right? So at that point, though, you can spend 20 hours doing all the negotiating. And I always say, like, just because you sat at the dealership for 3 hours that's not negotiating. That's just wasting your time. That's not how you negotiate, right? And with that in mind, you could spend 20 hours. You might not have gotten the right car or the right deal, right? So like, or a good deal. So it's like one of those things where it's the second biggest purchase you're making behind a home, right? You
Yeah.
have a real estate
Yeah.
agent, think of me as a real estate agent for cars. And that's the simplest way to kind of go about it and explain what I do. It's something that, really isn't offered, to the level of, white glove service and delivery and talking through that I do with my clients. I really pride myself on taking the time to really find the right car. Like we talked about, like some folks, and the term broker comes up, and that's not what I am. I think of myself as something more specialized than that. But those folks can't. They're not going to get you a Tesla, right? Because there's no money for them in there. I work directly for my clients, not for the dealerships, and it helps me be brand agnostic, which I think is really important in that landscape. To find the right car for them without having any kind of internal biases. I mean, certainly, I have my favorite cars, but at the end of the day, it matters more. What's on that matchmaking form and what's the right vehicle for them. I'm not pushing EVs. I'm not pushing anything. It's like I want my customer to be happy. Now, I can talk to them about an EV and kind of dispel some of the the concerns that some folks have, or tell them that, hey, look, the Buzz doesn't get really great range, but like, hey, you don't go on road trips and you have a Suburban too that's a gas powered, so take that, so that this can save you a whole bunch of money. Or like, this is your only car, maybe not a great fit. Again, I don't care what you get, and I mean that in a sincere way, in the sense of like, let's find you the right car. So that's kind of the Driveway Concierge in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Well, I'll make sure to include links to your website, and then also your social media where folks can follow you on X, where you're pretty active and you actually share very good tips and tricks, and just talking a little bit about it, and you're really good about answering people's questions on there. If somebody comes at you, so make sure you follow Mike on there. It's at _driveway_C. And that's for Mike there, and you can check out all the fun stuff that he's posting on there. And I mean, I hope if someone's listening to this and they're either looking to get a second vehicle, or maybe I don't know, would you help them get a Rivian?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even?
I've got a number of clients Rivians.
That's
I can also
awesome.
help, like, I kind of think of myself as a car problem solver. So there's a lot of clients who call me. They're like, hey, look, I just need this specific vehicle and VIN, order it for me. I go handle all the negotiations. So we don't need to do the whole end to end. That's kind of, just a more unique offering. But, folks call me all the time. Hey, look, I need a Grand Cherokee in this color. I don't want to deal with the dealership. Go get me the right price. But,
Yeah. Yeah, I know when I was in December, when I was looking to get my wife's Ioniq 5, I texted you all the information. I was like, Mike, I just want to get your thoughts and opinions on this because you are like the guy. And I was going through a dealership. They had a special thing, so it wasn't something that you could physically help with. But because I asked you, I'm like, could you help me get something better? But the reality was that was a really good deal already, because it was through Lease Hacker or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that worked out. But you were like, yeah, dude, that's fantastic. Like, 10
And
out of 10.
sometimes
So
that's
like
all people
you're
need,
doing
right? Is like, I offer some coaching calls too, where it's like, hey, look, let's talk through the numbers and what does it make sense, and where are you at?
validation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
because like not everybody's the expert, right? We leave that to people like you.
And you
So
shouldn't be, right? I mean, it takes a lot of time to become an expert, and your time is better off
yeah.
spent probably doing what you do day to day, right? Go focus on that. Don't spend 20 hours for something you're going to do once every, call it 3 to 5 years, right? That's not a good
Mm-hmm.
ROI on that investment.
No, heck no. Well, Mike, we're at an hour. Thank you so much for your time. I didn't know we would talk so much, but I mean, we didn't even get to talk about some other stuff we want to do. So we'll definitely have you back so we can talk other
I'd love that.
things, because there's so much to talk about. And yeah, a birdie told me you might be going through a rebrand, so we'll have to definitely have you
Yeah,
back
maybe
if
I'll
that
be back then.
happens.
That'd be perfect way to launch everything. So stay tuned.
Yeah. So, and I mean, and at the end of the day, like, yeah, it's great to be able to advertise your business, but you and I are friends, and I don't have any monetary, like, there's nothing you're not paying me or anything. I just want to make that clear that I invited you to talk Rivian and dealerships and all that. And, I support what you're doing, and happily will help in any way, shape, or form. But you're not paying me for any of this, and that's okay. No, I don't want it. I just want to make that clear so that nobody thinks that this is a paid sponsorship or anything. It's not.
Yeah.
Um, but thanks again, Mike, so much for joining me and chatting all fun things. Any last final thoughts? I'll make sure to throw your Rivian referral code down there in the comments, and a link to your website and all that, and your social media, so people can find you and follow you if they are interested.
Yeah.
And yeah, any final thoughts?
No, I think the most important thing is I just appreciate everybody kind of, any support that, does come through the social media handles and everything is great. I kind of call it like I have a service awareness problem, because most folks who talk to me, they're like, wait, I can do this and have someone like help me through this. And that's what the general reaction is. So, if you have friends or family who, are looking just to make this process be a little less cumbersome, time consuming, expensive, all of those things, right? Here to help, and excited to kind of continue to build this.
Yeah,
And I
no,
appreciate your
absolutely.
support.
For sure. We'll get your name out there and make sure people know who you are. Well, Mike, thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Thanks everybody again for tuning in to this episode of RivianTrackr Hangouts. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't. If you're watching this, leave a comment below on the YouTube. And remember, you can find this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music, and wherever you listen to your podcasts as well. I'll see you guys next week. Have a great one. Take care.